beware, if you go out and purchase a brand new trailer, you're going to need to break it in. The problem is we get excited, we hook onto it, and we just rip it, and we don't break the trailer in. And yes, you need to break the trailer in. Here we have a brand spanking new trailer, and here we have a brand spanking new-ish trailer. And let me tell you, neither one of these are ready for full-time service for the exact same reasons. If you're gonna buy that new trailer and you're immediately gonna go to work with it, there's a few things you need to do to make sure that you don't tear the components up, to make sure that they're ready to go, they're optimal for your conditions. And that's what we're gonna cover today. We're also gonna talk about Old Ugly there in the background, and we're gonna tell you why it's in the same shape as this and the same criteria as far as that break-in. It's exciting when you buy something new, and when it comes to trailers, you're either gonna go to work with that trailer or you're gonna use it for recreation, from utility trailers, maybe hauling your buggy around, to a cargo trailer, maybe you're hauling a race car or something in it, or maybe you've purchased a new camper trailer and you're gonna go on a family trip, maybe you're gonna go across the country, and that is a blast. That's the purpose of these. These are made to work, they're made for fun, they're made for recreation and everything in between. The problem is we get excited, we hook onto it, and we just rip it, and we don't break the trailer in. And yes, you need to break the trailer in. When you hook that new trailer up to your tow vehicle, if you're just gonna be running locally around town, maybe it's a smaller trailer, you're just putting a riding lawnmower, maybe you're push mowers or something on, and you're just cruising at in-town speeds, you're not getting on the highway, you're probably gonna be just fine. The difference is if we have this trailer here and we're gonna put maybe a small garden tractor, or maybe we're putting a side-by-side on it that's got some weight to it, or maybe you bought a car hauler and you're gonna put a vehicle on it that's got 4,000 or 5,000 pounds on there. This trailer does have brakes. You can't just run out on the highway at highway speeds with this right off the bat and it work correctly. There's some things you need to do. You need to put a few miles on it. And I know that sounds crazy to put a few miles on it before you use it, but it will save you in the long run. Back in the old days when I was younger, even when you bought a new vehicle, you had a break-in period on it, and some new vehicles have a break-in period today, and that's what got me to thinking about this video. We're installing a new engine in a vehicle, and we're gonna have to break that motor in. It's for my son. He is gonna be excited to get in it and smoke the tires on the first run, but we're not gonna do that. We're gonna follow the manufacturer's recommendations for break-in procedures on that motor so we can get the most life out of it and we don't shell it out on the first run. The first thing you're gonna have to do on this is tighten the lug nuts. Tighten the lug nuts. Tighten the lug nuts. You're going to check those. Some manufacturers recommend 5, 10, 25 miles. Some are 25, 50, 100. Regardless of what that is, you need to recheck those lug nuts on a brand new trailer. Don't lose a wheel. We've had some wheel loss here lately. It is costly and it can hurt somebody or tear it up. So make sure you have a torque wrench or something that can put the proper torque and retighten those. So you can imagine if you put a buggy on this and just went 200 miles, yeah, you're going to have to stop in that first several times to retighten that. Or you could just run it around town, get it on the highway a little bit, put some miles on it, retighten the lug nuts. The second thing you're going to do is look at your suspension components. So if you're running a spring axle setup like this, the U-bolts, many times those get installed and they never get touched again unless one of them comes loose, or maybe you're having a spring or some axle work done. New U-bolts need to be checked. Some manufacturers recommend, I think, as little as 50 miles. Most of them are going to say check them within 100 miles. After that, some will recommend again at 500. Usually if you check it at that 100 mile mark, you can always hit it again at 500. Then after that, you just need to look at them annually. But these are under a lot of stress. Bumpy roads can cause them to back off. So make sure that you retorque those. Look up, you can get on the interwebs and Google the size of U-bolt you have, or refer back to your manufacturer for the proper torque specs, because it is different for the size of diameter of bolt and the size axle tube you're using. The other thing you're going to look at is the suspension bolts, the spring eye bolts and the shackle bolts, to make sure that those are tight, make sure they haven't come loose. Now we have videos on that to show you not to over tighten them. And we will leave a link in the description below to show you several different things as far as installing this, maybe if you're doing maintenance or just to better help you to know what to look for. But check all the bolts. On a tandem axle trailer, you have 14 shackle bolts and spring eye bolts on there total. If one of those comes loose, you could lose or break a spring. Now, if you're running a torsion axle, most modern torsion axles are bolted on. The days of welding them on are kind of gone, and most of those are just going to have 2 bolts, whether that be a top mount or a side mount. I would recommend checking those within that 100-mile mark, and then, you know, checking them periodically or doing those on your annual. It's not that hard, and it doesn't take that long to do that. You really need to check all the suspension bolts because you don't want them coming loose. You lose an axle, it's going to cost you, and it may just tear the fender off your trailer. And the third thing you're going to do, if you have brakes, you're going to have to break the brakes in. Pardon the pun. A lot of people don't do this, or maybe they don't understand it. If you buy a new trailer, the brakes are not going to work 100%. It could be 20%, it may be less, maybe a little bit more. The brakes have to be burnished in, which we'll leave a link in the description below. It takes about 200 to 500 miles to burnish those brakes in. Once those brakes are burnished in, they have to have a manual adjustment unless you're running a self-adjusting setup. If you're running a self-adjusting setup, in a perfect world, those will adjust themselves up while you're doing the burnishing process. But don't go out and buy a brand new trailer and expect the brakes to slam you through the windshield when you hit them, because it's just not going to do that. It's not possible. Whether that's a 3,500 pound axle or if you're buying a big old huge trailer, it's not going to matter. And all this relates to that, whether it's checking the suspension bolts, the brakes, U-bolts, whatever. Let's say you have a huge 40-foot trailer that's got two 12K axles, maybe 15K axles. The first thing we want to do is go put that mini X on it, maybe a couple skid steers, load it all the way to the max, go out on the highway and like, man, this thing just doesn't stop right. Well, it's not going to stop right because the brakes are not burnished in. It literally has 0 miles on it. I would recommend not doing that. I would recommend if you want to load something on it, go ahead and load it. You can even put some weight on it, but don't get out and rip, 75, 80 miles an hour to maybe take a back road, something like that, to get those brakes burnished in, get them broke in, make sure they're adjusted correctly. Just don't go out and put it in service, at full throttle right off the get-go. Once you get it broke in and you've done some checks within that first 100, 500 miles, then it's ready to go. It's ready just to go straight to work, and then you can just do your annuals or whatever service interval you're on. Brakes are probably one of the most calls we get. Hey, I've purchased this new trailer and just don't seem like the brakes are working. Well, you're exactly right. The brakes aren't working because they're brand new. They haven't seated in. They haven't been burnished. They just need a little bit of time, a little bit of love, and you'll get the most out of them. Just don't break them in too much because you may smoke them right off the bat. That's pretty much everything to look for underneath here. That's 3 top things. And the 4th thing would be, which this one doesn't have much of it, but if you're, say you have a landscape trailer, maybe an RV, it's going to have some bolt-on accessories. It could be a bumper, it could be ramps, could be weed eater racks, whatever kind of thing it is. Anything that's been bolted on, any type of accessory, just like if you were to go have front and rear replacements put on your tow vehicle, they're going to tell you to check the bolts on those, retorque those down. So just look at your trailer. If you have any of those bolt-on accessories, whether they come from the factory or maybe it's something you added right after you bought it, after you put some miles on it, you're just going to want to put a wrench on those. If they have a torque spec, be sure to follow the manufacturer's torque spec so it don't fall off. Now, again, if it's a huge trailer, like a big 40-foot, you may have a few more things to check on there, as far as you may have, bigger suspension, you may need some bigger wrenches, bigger torque wrenches, or you may want to just pay a shop to do a check, after you've put 100 miles or so on it. But it is paramount that you recheck all this stuff so it doesn't fall off and hurt anybody. So now let's go back here and look at old Ugly. Now we're back here and look at this cream puff. I affectionately call it Ugly because it's kind of like some of y'all's first girlfriends. It's so ugly to make a freight train take a dirt road. But it'll get you to where you're going, nonetheless. I say this was brand spanking new-ish because it's got a lot of new components on it. Really, the only thing original on this trailer is the mainframe. The mainframe, top rails, fenders, that kind of stuff. Everything else is new. It's got new coupler, new safety chain retainers, new safety chains, new jack, new toolbox, full suspension. Other than hangers were in good shape. Other than that, it's all new parts, U-bolts, shackle straps, bolts, equalizers, new axles, brakes on rear axle. The only thing it doesn't have on it right now is new tires, which I'll be putting those on probably in the next day or 2. This trailer, even though it's been, I would say this is a full service from tip to tail, it's also got new wiring, new lights. So it is ready to go, but not full force. And this maiden voyage on this dude is probably gonna make a trip. We're probably gonna clock round trip 1,800 miles, probably going to be hauling about 4,000 pounds worth of cargo on it. Not going to be super heavy, but it is going to get some mileage. One of the areas I'm going is going to be a lot of terrain. Probably 80% of the trip that's going on is going to be in terrain, a few mountain passes here and there. So I will be utilizing the brakes. And that is the problem. We see that a lot. We'll have somebody coming in, you know, when it gets close to September for us, people will come in, hey, I need to get the brakes put on my trailer and new bearings because I'm going on an elk hunt. I've got that thing loaded to the gills. Well, the problem is putting new brakes on something like that, you're not going to have good braking. If I were to load this up today and head on my trip, the brakes will start working decent. By the time I get there, they will be burnished in likely, but unless I stop on the side of the road or stop at overnight stay and do that initial brake adjustment, they're not going to be optimal. Now, if I put self adjusters, that would help, but they still need to be properly burnished in before you put full load and put it fully to work. So what I've done for myself on this, and that's where it's hard, and I get it, you know, sometimes we're so busy, life gets in the way, we don't plan. I've given myself a little over 2 weeks after I've done everything to it before I make my trip to break the trailer in. So I will likely put, you know, somewhere 200 to 300 miles in it, just under the weight of the trailer, no payload on it. Then I will actually put several miles on it with about the same amount of weight that I'm going to be hauling on it, and give myself a final brake adjustment before I take off, because honestly, I don't want to mess with it. Now, I'm going to look funny pulling an empty trailer around, but here's the deal. I would rather look funny pulling an empty trailer around town than sitting on the side of the road with a lost hub, overheated brake, whatever have you. So I'm just going to look funny for about a week. Then I'm going to load it up. Then I'm going to put several hundred more miles on it before my trip. By the time I get round trip back, it will be almost enough mileage to do my secondary brake adjustment. I'll be, you know, getting close to that 3,000 mile mark at that point. And that's something else we can't forget. Once you buy that new trailer, or if you've done like me, you've done a full service, you've basically taken an old trailer and refurbed it and made it new, you can't forget all your maintenance intervals. You know, after you get that 3,000 miles on it, you got to adjust your brakes. After you put 12,000 miles on it, or if it's a year old, it's been 12 months, you need to do a bearing pack. If you're running oil bath hubs on a larger trailer, you need to follow the manufacturer's specifications for the maintenance intervals for those as well. Tire pressure, that's something else. If you buy a new trailer or you recently serviced one, maybe you bought new tire and wheel combos, not tire and rim combos, but tire and wheel combos. Maybe you purchase those, check the air pressure in them. You know, this trailer may have come in when it was cool weather, and it may be hot and cold, and they've, you know, gained or lost air pressure. That's just something you need to do. You need to check that periodically on your trip. Beware if you go out and purchase a brand new trailer, or if you take your old trailer in and you have it made brand new, or you make it brand new yourself, you're going to need to break it in. And I know some of you may argue that, and that's your right to argue that, but break it in. You know, there's some new trucks you go and buy that says don't haul any heavy loads for 1,000 miles so you can break in the engine, transmission, rear end. I completely agree with that. So if your trailer's recently been serviced, and maybe it was just a bearing pack, at the very minimum, you're going to need to re-torque your lug nuts. If that wheel has been off, or maybe you've had a flat, maybe you just went and got new tires put on it, you have to tighten the lug nuts. Tighten the lug nuts. If you went in for a bearing pack and it had brakes on it, or maybe you got new brakes, you're going to need to burnish those in. You're going to need to make sure that you follow manufacturer's recommendation on that so that your brakes are working in optimal conditions. Maybe you replaced 2 springs. Maybe you had broken a spring. Maybe you had to replace an axle. Again, check those U-bolts. Check those suspension bolts. Maybe you had a torsion axle put on that's bolted on. Check those. It's just like a new trailer. If you've had one freshly serviced, there's some steps you need to take to do your initial break-in period to make sure it's ready to roll and you don't have any breakdowns. New trailers, new repairs, make sure you break everything in, make sure you re-torque everything you need to re-torque, and tighten the lug nuts.